Welcome to the Beautifully Ridiculous podcast. I am your hostess with the mostest, Katie Campbell.
This podcast contains mature subject matter and is intended for entertainment purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello, Katie Dids, and welcome back to the Beautifully Ridiculous podcast. I am your hostess with the mostest, Katie Campbell. This is episode 5. Holy crap, we're on episode 5? Okay.
Hey, I'm beautifully ridiculous. Yeah, I'm such a hot mess. La-da-dee-da. So I'm beautifully ridiculous. Imperfect, no less. La-da-dee-da, la-da-da-da-dee-da. La-la-la-la-dee-dee-da.
When we last left Tom in episode 4, he was discussing how he was pulled in so many different directions. He was, first and foremost, a family man, but he was a family man that worked in a prison with 400 inmates. And so he was also talking about being pulled with trying to assist these inmates in rehabilitation and recovering themselves so that they could go back out into the community as law-abiding citizens that contribute to society. And he also talked about the dichotomy of being program versus being one of the security staff, in that he had to walk this tightrope of, being an authority figure, being a leader, but also trying to build a rapport between inmates and himself, and also trying to be the bridge and liaison between the security staff and the inmates. He was sort of this wizard or jack of all trades that was trying to make everything go. I feel like it's myself. I feel like I'm a mom at home. I'm just trying to make everything and everyone go. What an interesting parallel. At least in my mind, it's an interesting parallel. Let's hear some more from Tom. What else has he got to say? Then we'll get into Boulder Bay Camp. Was there a higher
800 animals all there. But, it's just like anything, you have an issue with your family or whatever else. Okay, you're backing off, you're going to challenge, or you're going to work something out. You have to be able to solve it, but satisfy yourself. You can't do that like a lot of people would go along with it. We're 100% against it, like staff. Well, next thing you know, the guy's a basket case, doesn't want to come to work, he's sick. I checked the medical records. I went out several of the places and talked to the wife, and she says, he's done. He starts acting up, he's putting his uniform on, he's just,
Yeah.
Because the inmates and all the pressure that's on that stuff.
Right. Was there a high attrition rate with guards? Like constantly turning over in staff?
The staff always wanted to have a job. And so the system was broke. Security and program.
Right.
So the staff on security would frisk people down and open doors, and that was it.
Okay.
But after a while, if he was not, I shouldn't say getting along, but if he was being targeted by some of the inmates, they became a part of get him out of there.
Yes, yeah.
Because he'd say, like I told you, take your apron off, do that, you're supposed to frisk him down. And sometimes as I said, they put all this crap, molasses maybe, and the guy goes to frisk him down. He's just coming. Are you okay, boss? Can I go now, boss? And you can hear him yelling to this guard, calling him boss, and hey, boss, you really in charge here, and man, you really know how to run things, boss, and that's the signal to the other inmates,
Oh.
And when they came out, it'd be the same thing. So next thing we know, at least I would know, they're targeting this guy.
So there was their own lingo in there as well that you had to watch for, all their own language.
So the staff had to recognize that these guys are doing X number of years and they're working in the kitchen. And when I was there and I took over that one unit for the kitchen, I made it a huge privilege for certain things to happen. And one of the things is I run this kitchen unit. I set up a system in the visiting area because the people come and visit and they would sit there and all that kind of stuff. No touching, and they had a guard out there and he checked them in and checked them out. And then, so I thought, so I talked to the inmates. I said, we have once a week, sometimes every other week, you get all the guys in the unit, 50 of them, and you have a meeting. And the inmates just didn't like it and they didn't want to sit there. But what I did, I was running this kitchen unit, and I said to them, I'm talking to the deputy warden there, and we're going to change that kitchen thing. And I said, what do you think we should do? And this one inmate said, well, what the hell do you mean you're going to change it? We do the. I said, no. I said, what I'm talking about is the visiting area, because there's nothing out there. They go through a double skilled door to go in there, and they're fist out and everything else, and into the visiting area for the visit their people. So what I did, I told the people, I said, we should turn this thing into a plus thing. So I got the inmates who I picked to go into the visiting area, and I set up a system where the people come in, could buy a coffee. It was 25 cents. And then I moved on. I brought up to the jail sometimes donuts and whatever else. And it was another 25 cents for them or whatever. So, and then I dressed the inmates in just the greatest whites you ever seen. And they took to pants and they pressed themselves just like bracelets. They were blessed, and they had a little string tie thing there, and they were waiters, and they dressed so. And the staff would say to them, what the hell do you do in that goddamn visiting area? Those guys are like a bunch of pimps walking around, they have white shirts and everything else, because I had the laundry and all these guys, they got that thing. So all you have to do is get the people, like the inmates, interested in their job, not packing drugs and everything else. Hey, and it became a huge privilege to be able to go into the visiting area.
And be a waiter.
Yeah.
What a neat program. That's thinking outside of the box. I mean, that's really ingenious.
It's a mind game.
Yeah.
You have to do things, so these people, the staff frisking them down all the time, but they can smuggle stuff. So I used to tell the staff, look, why don't we work it out so, put stuff out here, nice uniform type stuff, but it's there. So they come out, drop that stuff, they've got that thing, put the apron on, put the white, I kept that separate. So all the stuff they were packing, they had to take it off, and when they came to the thing, put their they call them civvies. But, okay, put your things in, put the apron on there. Some started wearing the hats. I brought hats out, all that kind of crap. I made a visiting area a real plus place. Everybody wanted to come to this one unit 4 because then they would be able to be out there and visits and all that kind of stuff. And then I charged the visitors a price, like 25 cents for a cup of coffee, and I upped it after a while to 50 cents. And that funds went into a fund for the unit. And we'd have meetings, and I'd say, the funds come up and everything. We got one meeting where I don't know how much we had, $500, $600 in this kitty for the inmate.
Wow,
And,
that's quite a bit of money.
Yeah, and I talked to business, but we would buy things like Christmas time or whatever. We may go with the kitchen and buy certain things for the inmates, pop them open, put them up. Or outward bound, I started on. But the whole thing is get the person not being an idiot and get them involved. Hey.
Mm-hmm. And is that the premise behind Alouette Lake in the camp that was there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was started out like a bonus. So people who were starting to, hey, be responsible, clean up, do work or whatever, all that stuff. And I added community, family relations. I had that, but third one on the list.
Right.
In regards to what's he doing with dad and mom or the people he robbed. And I could put big pluses on if the guy had got a hold of the person he robbed.
For like restitution and communication?
Well, they didn't have money for restitution.
Right.
But just the fact that the guy said, look.
The willingness.
I was high on drugs, but it's no excuse. But just to get the guy to take responsibility for his actions, whether he beat a cop or hit somebody with tire, whatever. You just have to get that. And as a result, that spreads through the jail. These guys they spread information. Hey, you go to this unit, that Hudson guy, you get out here, you do it, So.
I like it. I'm just going to...
But you can't, everybody wouldn't do that. There was lots of guys running their unit. They wouldn't go near that. Some of my friends, they said, are you kidding? Them bastards. I said, them bastards are getting out. Hopefully, they're going to stay out.
Hopefully.
Anyway.
I think it takes a special kind of person to do that. George and I have talked about this before, where he commends you for seeing the sin as separate from the man. The man himself is a good person and the sin is not the sinner. Yeah. I think that takes a special kind of person to be able to separate that and not have that animosity or that vengeance kind of attitude that a lot of people still want to have.
Yeah.
So as program director, Tom had to continuously find different ways of connecting with inmates and assisting them with rehabilitation, whether that be schooling or emotional regulation, and just trying to find different ways to motivate people to help themselves. And what came out of that, and it's mentioned several times in the interview, is a place or a camp called Boulder Bay Camp or Alouette Lake or even Outward Bound, all of which are the same name for one program, which they called Outward Bound. And it was one of the forestry camps. It was a little satellite sort of program that the province had going in those years in the 60s. And it was literally a camp on Alouette Lake. And it was in the middle of nowhere. It was only accessible by boat. There weren't really any fences or gates or bars. It was a cabin in the woods. And these guys did between 3 and 4 month stints out there. So instead of doing 2 to 4 years in the penitentiary, you could opt for one of these forestry programs. Boulder Bay is the one we're talking about today. And then instead of doing 2 to 4 years, you could cut it down to maybe 3 or 4 months at the camp, and then you could potentially be up for parole, early parole, if you did well in these camps. And Tom was instrumental in facilitating them. There's another video slideshow about Boulder Bay Camp narrated by Corrections Branch History Committee's Fred Hunt that I'll play for you now.
In 1967, Senior Correctional Officer Lloyd Hopper was asked to establish a wilderness program for young adult males based on Outward Bound principles, focused on work and survival leadership. Lloyd took the original Outward Bound program, developed for sailors during World War II, and adapted it to a 3-stage, later 4-stage, 4-month program to be run in a wilderness setting. It became known as the Boulder Bay Camp Wilderness Program.
As program director for Haney, Tom had to come up with different ways that would motivate the inmates, who were young men between the ages of 16 and 24. Anybody with a teenage child knows that it can be difficult to connect to teenagers at times. And so they started a program. Tom was wrapped up in starting this program called Outward Bound. And today, Outward Bound has sort of two kind of meanings. There's outward bound as in like tourism, where people want to go on these epic guided adventures for Outward Bound. But the actual meaning of Outward Bound and the program of Outward Bound was a much earlier concept. And there is still an Outward Bound Canada. And I'm going to read for you an excerpt from that website, Outward Bound Canada. It says, in 1920, Han, H.A.H.N., was a German-born Jewish educator. He co-founded and served as headmaster of the Schule Schloss Salem, a private boarding school which sought to educate and nurture students to help them become compassionate and responsible members of society. In 1933, as the Nazi regime began rising to power, Han became increasingly outspoken in his criticism of Adolf Hitler and his supporters. It was at this time that Han publicly called on his students and their families to stand up against the Nazis and pick a side. In doing so, he established the Salem School as an anti-Nazi and anti-fascist institution. This act, as well as Han's personal views and ethnic background, landed him in a German prison, from where he was later exiled to Britain. There in Britain during the Second World War, Han co-founded Outward Bound to help young people develop character and resilience through overcoming challenges and have the confidence to stand up to the threat of fascism and other social injustices. Outward Bound's history is clear. Our organization was created as a tool to foster inclusion, diversity, and resilience. Although much has changed over the years, we're still working for the same cause, and we have no intentions of slowing down. In light of recent events and challenges around the world, it is important to reflect on Outward Bound's rich history and renew our pledge to cultivate resilience, leadership, and compassion in all communities in which we serve. Just like the students and families who bravely stuck with Han's Salem School in the 1930s, we have a responsibility now to continue building the future they envisioned. Han saw a future without the threat of fascist takeover, where responsible citizens could live comfortably with one another and achieve their goals at high capacity. Thanks to our staff, participants, and communities, Han's goal is still in sight and progress is made every day. Article contributed by Adrian Schopp. That is the Outward Bound Canada review of the program. I also found from the U.S. Department of Justice, it's called the Office of Justice Programs, and this particular article is titled Outward Bound in Corrections, a Compilation, and it was published in 1977. It says, Outward Bound is a program which uses the wilderness as the context and vehicle for countering personality and skill deficiencies tending to produce delinquent and criminal behavior. Backpacking, rock climbing, canoeing, solo survival, and other physical, mental, wilderness problem-solving experiences are structured for the participants. Completion of the tests fosters self-confidence, responsible decision-making, and skills in managing one's environment. Social skills are developed through cooperation and interaction in small groups in the course of working toward wilderness objectives. Outward Bound was founded in Britain during World War II as a survival school for merchant seamen, stressing both the physical and psychological aspects of survival. Since then, it has become an international organization with more than 30 schools.
But, like at jail, after a while, it changed from somebody doing something on, like the staff in uniform. Everything was ordered. Hey, now, hey, and there was no names or nothing in there, until finally, the guy was on the one door that went into the kitchen, and these people, the cooks and clean, all that kind of stuff. To change that a little bit, the guy comes along and says, "Well, Pete, it's not just hey Pete, what time's your shift start?" He should start something to, he's doing his job, making sure you don't pack knives out and whatever. But but try to bridge the gap just a little bit.
Just a little
and
bit.
that, next thing you know, goes to, because we had two staff who were hired to cook all the meals. Smith was one, Gordon Smith, fantastic guy. He took chances and all.
Would the staff eat the same?
He
as
was
the
a
inmates?
staff member.
But I'm asking, would the staff
and
eat the same as the inmates?
Yeah.
Yeah, they would. So the staff
Yeah.
were fed on site
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Yeah.
And it didn't take long, maybe 6 to 8 months to a year. Everybody in that jail, 800, all wanted to work in the kitchen. All wanted to go to Unit 4 because they had pool tables, they had outward bound, they had this, they had that. Why? Well, they earned it. They did things. We turned things with our business manager. Anytime he could cut his budget and the inmates picked it up, hey, buy uniforms for all these guys. The inmates bought their own clothes.
That's
Happy and bad, yeah. So the business manager, instead of them ruining their clothes and ripping them and everything, buy their own goddamn clothes.
I love it. What was Outward Bound? What is Outward Bound?
Outward Bound was a program where we took them out into a rural setting. So we built camps like Alawa Lake. Mm-hmm. You know where the Narrows are, George? Well, you go past there maybe about 100 yards, and on the right, we went up that hill. It's about a quarter of a mile, fairly steep, and we built a camp up there.
Mm-hmm.
I'll read you another excerpt from an article on the Outward Bound website from September of 2018. It is titled, "We Do Not Fix Bad Teens, How to Change the Paradigm of At-Risk Youth." Bad is a shaky platform to be placed on. It is not a useful piece of feedback or a nugget of real talk from a trusted adult. It is a stagnant, heavy label, a "you are" statement, leaving no nuance for "you are at this moment" or "you are sometimes," and "when you do this, you are bad." It leaves little context for hope. Under the umbrella of Outward Bound exists many different types of courses. Intercept courses are tailored to at-risk youth, while others, such as classic expeditions for high school and Pathfinder expeditions, are tailored to individuals seeking out challenge and adventure. All Outward Bound courses use the same course elements and core values with the mission of changing lives through challenge and discovery. On an Outward Bound Intercept course, we also shine light on behaviors that are not serving our students well and support the growth of positive coping, emotional management, and communication skills. Nobody can be fixed, and to fix a student sounds like an impossible and unrewarding task, so we do not fix. Instead, we open eyes, we challenge, push, and support. We provide tools and treat our students with unconditional positive regard. And these actions, no matter the course, often do change a person. Not because that person is bad and needs to be changed, but because that person is embarking on a journey that very few people ever get to experience. All Outward Bound courses start with a baseline understanding of student behavior based on William Glasser's choice theory. According to choice theory, all people are trying to get their needs met at all times. This is not good or bad, it just is. My students' choices are just like my choices, my friends' choices, my supervisor's choices, and all the choices of the women I see standing in line for Chipotle. All of us are trying to meet our most basic needs for survival, fun, love, and belonging, power and freedom in different ways. So when a student shows up to a course struggling with behaviors of running away from home and or excessive anger, for example, our course goal always ties back to what they need and how they can get those needs met in a more positive way. A recent student participated in an activity where we delved deeper into the root causes behind our actions. After considering the recent events in her life, her father leaving, her mother homeschooling her, and her brother facing a possible prison sentence, we discussed her own behaviors. For this student, she tied her behavior to those challenges, saying she felt a deficiency of freedom and fun in her life, which she fulfilled in unhealthy ways. During her course, we worked on giving her practice in meeting those needs in different ways, such as taking on more responsibilities so she could have more freedoms and building fun activities into her days before she needed to get work done. The need for survival, fun, freedom, power, love, and belonging will never go away, and it is a natural and healthy part of life. It is how our students work with and understand their own needs that influences their behaviors. We practice assertive communication, anger management, and coping skills frequently and intentionally. We work on these skills so much that by the end of the course, it can be very challenging to shake the habit of making an assertive request by using our outward bound lingo of CFR, concern, feeling, request. But these skills are not aimed towards some ultimate definitive personality change. We teach lessons that empower students. The moments my students remember the most are not that time I asked Amanda to stop putting her wet clothes on my wet gear, but the time we navigated in the dark by ourselves to an island where we raced hermit crabs and ate the best trail mix I've ever had in my life. These are the moments where challenge and adventure meet, the memories that stand out in our students' minds years after the course has ended and leave them thinking, wow, I cannot believe I did that. I will never have the correct answer to my students' questions. Why are you trying to change us? Even if I answer honestly, I want you to feel strong. I want you to know yourself. I want you to love yourself. I want you to have all the power you need to take charge of your life. It will fall short of explaining why an outward bound expedition is so hard. To some extent, however, the question misses the point, because I do not have much power over how my students change. I may try to plant the right seeds, but whatever change occurs depends on the students themselves and may not become completely evident until weeks, months, or even years after the expedition has come to a close. A common phrase used by the outward bound instructors is planting a seed. To me, this is the ultimate goal. Even if a course is multiple months long, in the grand scheme of things, it is barely a blip, and to plant a seed means that the events of this course will continue to sprout new thoughts in my students for many years. Many seeds are planted on a given course. There are seeds that address student behaviors. There are seeds that speak to what a student is capable of. There are seeds of adventure, seeds of triumph, seeds of connections, and seeds of community. Outward Bound does not fix bad teens. It plants seeds. Speaking of seeds, let me drop a little seed and remind you that my first love is music. I have several albums and several music videos out on my other channel, KatieCampbell_1983, and you can find me anywhere you stream on any of the platforms. And because you're captive, here's 10 seconds of my music, and hopefully you go find out with this little seed that I'm planting. We'll be back in just a minute.
Without it, I'll never find my spark. Happy, it's a choice. Ooh, it's gone, lost my voice. Ooh, my fear rises up. Ooh, I need to find and fill my cup. I'll be okay when the lights go out. I'll save myself 'cause there's no one around.
As educators, we have explicit goals built into our job to teach lessons, give feedback, and reach learning targets. We also have implicit goals that are not laid out on a sheet of paper but are based on the needs of our students within society. Our at-risk students do not need to be fixed, and it is not fair to call any student bad. What Outward Bound provides is not a solution to a problem, but a high-quality social and emotional learning and personal guidance. By providing this guidance, we are not fixing our students, but opening their eyes to who they are and what they need and who they can become. Thank you to Rebecca Fenn, who is an educator in California with the New York City Outward Bound schools.
And then the people in the main jail, these 800s, if they wanted, they could go to a program to try and get themselves qualified for Outward Bound. So all of a sudden we had a ripple effect. Instead of guys being real bad people down there, if you want a shot and do time up there, not only that, if you really get your act together with family and everything else, even if you're doing 4 years, whatever, we could have you out of there in less than 6 months. Outward Bound, go through the program. That's swinging through the shields, white and tight ropes. 6 o'clock in the morning, me, ice cold, middle of December, in the lake.
Oh, my word.
Every morning, quick showers back. We're all just people, so get the guys ready for the committee. And so more and more people from the main jails want to, I can only handle 50 in that camp. But
it was interesting because I saw there's one like 10-minute video from the province of British Columbia about Alouette Lake, and it has photos of it. And I one of them was, what did it say? Oh, there was a no swearing policy. If somebody got caught swearing, then they got rid of family time. Like it was really fascinating how it was, having your hair cut and making sure that you were on time, the bed made, like that almost military precision of giving them structure and rules, and it incentivized them. Swearing would get you in trouble and make you do push-ups and get you kicked out of the program. I would not pass. I'd have to do hard time. Shit. All right. Here is another article from the Government of British Columbia's website. Attendance programs started in the 1960s as corrections initiatives through regional and local offices. They were directed at youth who required more control than what was provided through regular probation supervision. Youth were committed to these programs as a condition of probation. They ranged from daily attendance, examples like after school, to weekend residential and full-time residential programs. Some attendance programs included Prince Rupert's attendance program for 8 boys aged 14 to 16. It featured group discussion, recreation, individual counseling, and outdoor camping trips. The boys were required to attend 5 evenings a week with a campout every other weekend. Port Alberni attendance program for juvenile boys attendance was required 4 nights per week and 2 weekends per month. The objective was to develop more constructive use of leisure time. Group counseling, recreation, and outward bound techniques were stressed. Community service projects were undertaken for senior citizens and other community groups. The DARE program, not to be confused with Nancy Reagan's DARE program. This DARE program is the Detention and Recreation Extension. This Vancouver program operated daily with the objective of reducing acting out behavior by involving youth in physical activity and work experiences. It targeted youth who required more intensive counseling than was available from their social worker or probation officer, funded by Corrections and the Department of Human Resources. Other examples of attendance programs were the Search and Leadership Training Program, which is SALT, was based on an outward bound program philosophy. Marpole Probation Hostel, which opened in 1965 for those youth requiring a condition of residence as part of their probation order. The Machosen Ranch from 1969, just outside of Victoria. The House of Concord. The Choyne Ranch, a group home/probation resource developed as an alternative to sending juveniles to the Brannan Lake Industrial School. There was camp trapping, coastline challenges, plea homes, youth futures, and Joss Mountain Wilderness Project. There was a strong emphasis in BC on alternatives to custody programs during that period of the 1960s to the 1980s. In keeping with the themes of rehabilitation from New Haven Farm and separating the young offenders from the hardened criminals at Oakalla and Haney Correctional Institute, Tom, as program director, started, researching and getting some other programs together. And he was instrumental in getting the Boulder Bay Camp established on Alouette Lake. The Boulder Bay Camp on Alouette Lake was based on the principles of the Outward Bound movement and program. And so I found on the British Columbia website, it says 1967 Boulder Bay Camp. In July 1967, Boulder Bay Forestry Camp on Alouette Lake admitted its first residents, young adult offenders. Experimental programs based on Outward Bound were used at the camp. And there are some videos on there on the BC website, and I'm going to play a couple of them for you, I think, right now. This is retired director of Boulder Bay Camp, Lloyd Hopper. You can find this on the Government of BC website.
I think in January of that next year, so that's 67, I was asked to start a summer camp, which was a upward bound combination camp. And I established that at basically called Boulder Bay on Pine Lake, which is above Helmet Lake. Fairly secure place. The only way by boat.
What was Boulder Bay for? What sort of inmates?
It was we tried to select people who would benefit from the outward bound portion of it. But the word problem was more of a conditioning thing, although it developed to be more than that. We did clean up the lake. Bad sheep was debris. Once they finished, we set it up as a 3-month camp at that time, a 3-month course. And at the end of that time, if they completed the course, they would be highly recommended for parole.
Right. Okay.
And I think most of them made it. If they didn't make the grade, they would be returned to the institution.
There's another video slideshow about Boulder Bay Camp narrated by Corrections Branch History Committee's Fred Hunt that I'll play for you now.
In 1967, Senior Correctional Officer Lloyd Hopper was asked to establish a wilderness program for young adult males based on outward bound principles, focused on work and survival leadership. Lloyd took the original Outward Bound program, developed for sailors during World War II, and adapted it to a 3-stage, later 4-stage, 4-month program to be run in a wilderness setting. It became known as the Boulder Bay Camp Wilderness Program. The camp was located at the narrows between Upper and Lower Alouette Lake and was primarily constructed from the remains of Gold Creek Camp, a recently closed corrections facility on the opposite side of Alouette Lake. Parts of the old camp were floated across the lake and used in a prefab fashion. Not easily accessible, the trip to the camp was a 20-mile drive from Haney Correctional Center to North Beach on Alouette Lake, then a half-hour boat ride to the beach at Boulder Bay, then a quarter-mile hike uphill to the actual camp. All supplies had to come in by boat and were wheelbarrowed up the hill by the trainees. There were no powered vehicles or powered tools apart from chainsaws. About 90 cords of wood were used per year to heat the cabins, all cut and chopped by the trainees. There were 36 young adults, 3 groups of 12, on the program at any one time. Selecting suitable inmates was the job of Classification Office at Haney Correctional, with provincial court judges from around the province frequently sending offenders to Haney with the recommendation they attend the camp. Inmates were assigned to a group on arrival, with one group to a cabin, and a staff person staying with the group throughout. Staying with meant eating, sleeping, and living with the group, including supervision during the day. A 2-4 shift made it possible, 2 24-hour shifts on and 4 days off. A principal officer on a 2-4 shift supervised daily activity, while a camp director worked a standard day shift. Trainees were typically 17 to 21 years of age, first time incarcerated, and in the last 9 months of their sentence, with no history of drug use. There was a big motivator for the newly assigned camp residents. If they completed the 4 stages of the very challenging course, they were recommended for parole. Every 2 days, a hut leader was appointed to assist in the running of the hut, including the key task of doing count. The underlying philosophy here and for the program overall was stressing the need to work together. Over the 4-stage program, the trainees learned basic work habits and progressed through a number of courses to develop various outdoor-oriented skills and knowledge, including a plunge in the lake in all weather. The work stage was primarily intended for conditioning as well as to keep the camp operating. It included time on the woodpile and on splitting shakes. Daily schedule was rigorous, with a 6:30 a.m. wake-up Monday through Saturday, work from 8 until 4:45, courses from 5:45 to 9:30, with a half-hour off for coffee. On Sundays, a hike from 11 to 3, and a movie at 7 p.m. Trainees are paid for their work, $2 a day in Stage 1, $3 in Stage 2, $4 Stage 3, and $5 in Stage 4. Courses included fire suppression, map and compass, ropes and knots, canoe safety, basic logging, first aid, wilderness survival, and basic rock climbing and mountain rescue. Group skills were learned through wall climbing and rappelling, making use of the physical skills learned on the obstacle course. Participants had to pass one stage before proceeding to the next, with the climax being a 3-day solo where the trainee, equipped with basic essentials, had to fend for himself in a wilderness setting. One strict rule for residents was no swearing. Consequences were immediate. 25 push-ups for those in the first stage, 35 in the second stage, etc. Directors of the camp included Carl Dirksen, who took over from Mr. Hopper, Tom Hodgson, Ernie Bradford, Gordon Bain, the longest-serving director, and Chris Hawkes, in charge when the camp closed in 2002 after 35 years of operation. Graduation day at the camp was a significant event with staff, parents, and invited guests gathering to watch demonstrations of skills learned, present diplomas, and offer congratulations. Completion of the demanding 4 months was a memorable achievement for these young men, as seen in a letter to Gordon Bain in 1985 from a former program graduate who said, quote, "Thank you and your staff for what a fine camp that you run. Boulder Bay was the best thing that ever happened to me."
There were other programs there too, right? Like woodworking and machinists. And all the
In
rest
the
of
major, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And some people, not a lot, but some of them, and the instruction were really good. But, the hard thing is after they got their training, and the guy's been there for a year or 2 years, whatever, after they got training, what does the kid do? He's getting out, he's going home. Then the thing was to get him some kind of employment. So the guy's going to work for Burnaby shipyards or whatever. So that became quite a deal for the different places. Like Jimmy Patterson now for Save on Foods. Guy packed groceries out and whatever. You couldn't take a guy after he'd done 4 years or whatever. He's been a criminal since he was 9 type thing. You couldn't just take that guy, put him in that, then go out and say, oh, he's changed. You had to have something he can do, and you had to have people like Jimmy Patterson, all these guys. Salvation Army was just the best, because no matter what the guy did, if he went off the thing and used a little bit of drugs, I set up, and I rented 12 beds from the Sally Ann, Main and Hastings, and then the other one was up on Broadway. I rented beds there.
Wow.
And so when the guys went out and they came back in after work, they would go up there. And if there was somebody who didn't show up, the guy pick up the phone and say, oh, Henderson hasn't shown up. It's, past supper time. And you say it's 7:30 or whatever, 9 o'clock, whatever. He hasn't showed up. I said, oh, okay, I'll play with it. I'll wait. And in some cases, the guy was doing extra stuff. There was only one case out of about 2.5 years of that where the one guy just escaped, just walked away.
Skipped out.
And he actually, I'd seen him about a year later because there was a problem in Oakalla, and I had somebody in there, and the guy wanted to see he said, Mr. Olson's still in the business. He said he's in Oakalla, which is a maximum security jail. And this guy said, yeah, Olson's still out there. He said, okay, and he wrote me a letter. I still have it.
No way.
Yeah, it was just a story of life, all this crap he's involved with and all that kind of stuff, how he fell in this, as he writes it, he fell in this fire, it's drugs.
Sure.
And he made the whole story of his life. And but somebody turned on the tap and put the fire out. That was me.
Oh, what a lovely, that's a lovely
Yeah.
sentiment, Tom. I really like that.
So, and for a while we kind of corresponded, but I cut that all off because you have to let them be themselves,
Yeah.
and to contact me, because I told them all the guys, staff, they didn't want anybody to know about it. And I used to tell them, hey, my phone number and my address in the phone book. Pick up a local phone book anywhere. And there you go. So nobody ever came here. However, there was times there, I thought, and I had a 12-gauge shotgun. It wasn't loaded, but I hooked that right along my bed because guys told me what they were going to do to their family. So,
Jeez, Tom.
yeah.
That's
And
a brave soul.
you never know if somebody might just, keep
Follow
going.
through, yeah.
But it was a threat, and there was lots of them. So
Thank you so much for being here, friend. I am super thrilled, and I'm going to be working on episode 6 very shortly here. If you've made it this far, please be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button and share it if you're interested in doing so. It helps my channel grow, and it helps me continue to make more videos for you, more podcasts for you, and I'm very excited to be here and do that. And I can't wait. My very last question that I asked Tom in my interview with him was there one particular event that made you almost quit? And I was not prepared for the answer that he gave me. And I'm not actually sure what episode that will be on. It could be episode 7, it could be episode 8. I have no idea, but it is coming, and it involves an attack and self-defense. And as I said, I was woefully unprepared for the story that Tom told me. So stick around and find out, and we'll talk next time on the Beautifully Ridiculous podcast. Have a good day.
So I'm beautifully ridiculous.